I'd just like to start by saying I'm going to be sharing something personal today and a little bit vulnerable, but I hope that somebody can take something out of it. So 9 months after starting Moneytree, I met my fiance. I saw her at a party, but I could not get the courage to go talk to her. I was at the party with my co-founder, Ross, and he pushed me. Hey, we're going to leave this party. You got to talk to her or we're getting out of here. That's what good co-founders are for. I approached her and she was holding an iPhone, and my startup, Moneytree, a personal finance app, was in early beta. The app wasn't on the market. So I asked her if she wanted to test my app to get her personal finances in order. That's a great opening, don't you think? A few minutes later, I started out of the party and I met Ross and I said, I got her name, I got her phone number, and she's going to type her bank password into our app. Yes. So 2 years later, I proposed and she said yes. The app had great UX. I asked my senpai, my coworker, Zach, you seem to have a really good balance of family, of life, of work, of fun. What's your advice to me about getting married? Don't, he said. I registered our marriage in October 2014, and my wife and I began to plan a wedding reception for the following March. This is us at the time, Paul and I, my co-founder, our CEO, hustling. Your startup is going to permeate every aspect of your life, including the relationship with your friends and your life partner. This is a story about the startup, my startup, and my marriage at a very critical time for both. After I proposed, my fiance asked me about money. I was running a young startup after all, and we needed money for our wedding reception. As for me, I wasn't worried about money. People that worry about money tend not to start their own business. Even if Moneytree failed, I could just go get a job. I could use some money that I'd set aside for retirement. I could borrow money from my family for my wedding if I had to. But my wife had had family members who had real trouble with money, so for her, this was a very serious situation. And she asked me, when is your salary going to go up, Mark? Well, Moneytree had been raising a Series A at the time, and I gave her the answer that my co-founder, Paul, responsible for fundraising, gave me. We're going to raise our salaries when we raise our round. Well, my fiance said to me, when's that going to be? And I said, well, we've got about 6 months left before we fume, so it's got to be soon, right? But I didn't tell her this so glibly. I told her this because I needed it to be true. A lot of founders talk about having a mental game of not defeating yourself, positive mental attitude. We're going to close this round. And so it's with that spirit that I told her this. But raising money was not easy. We had a competitor that had outraised us. They had better user acquisition numbers. They were using the money that they raised to advertise and get even more users. And VCs, in those pitch meetings, they would reliably ask that question that every founder hates. What makes your company different than competitor X, Mark? I don't think they want to hear your answer. They just want to watch you squirm in those meetings. I don't know if there's any VCs here. So while this competitor did make it hard for us to raise, they had created a new opportunity. With crisis comes opportunity. They were building a SaaS accounting software package integrating what we would now call open banking rails. They connected to banks to aggregate data, and so did we. So responsible for sales, I reached out to every CXO I could find of an accounting software companies in Japan. How did I reach them out? I sent them letters in the mail that needed to be signed for on delivery. Mr. CEO-san, I am sure that you are aware of the threat of this fast-growing competitor. I have what they have, and I do not want to compete with you. I'd like to partner with you. Please meet me. And there was a lot of interest in our partial pivot. The bad news was we were about to run out of money. It was January now, and we could not pay our February salaries. And I was finalizing a large deal with one of the anchor clients in this industry, and this deal included a sizable upfront payment to Moneytree. This was sales revenue. This wasn't raising money, and it would keep us alive for a couple more months. This is my co-founder, Paul, and one of our advisors, Tsuchiya-san, having a dinner after a big meeting with that client. We're so close. We're going to get this deal done. We needed that money to hit the bank account before February 25th so we could pay our staff. But the contract was going through endless revisions. I was on the phone with them every day, and I think they held all the cards in the negotiation. I think they knew that. If they're watching this, well, anyway. We agreed to give up a lot of terms just to get to a yes, just to get to a signed agreement. And we signed the contract, and I smashed the refresh button on our internet banking corporate bank account hourly. When is the money going to come in? And a few days before February payroll, there it was. We'd survived to fight another day. This wasn't a Series A, though. This was enough to keep us going. So we stopped paying anything non-essential. And my co-founders stopped taking a salary until we could raise to preserve capital. We received advice to stop paying our rent. It takes time to evict a company from real estate. But my wife was really nervous about the money. So my co-founders and I agreed, okay, Mark can keep taking his salary. But even at that salary, it wasn't really enough for the down payment for the wedding. And in the end, my wife paid the down payment. And she paid herself back with the receipts that we got from the reception in Japan. This is very common. We raised a bridge round in that May, and based on the sales momentum we were seeing from all these letters I'd sent out, finally, in October 2015, a year later, we had closed our Series A. The company had almost fumed twice. It was a rough patch, but we survived, right? Fintech as a keyword at that time had just started to take off. I was like, yes, we just raised fintech. I helped start up the Fintech Association in Japan as a founding board member. But there was no way for me to share any of this excitement with my wife. She didn't understand it, as she wasn't working in fintech, and she didn't live and breathe this industry the way I was. Which was kind of a problem, because despite having enough cash to now raise our salaries, there was a new problem. In the eyes of our lead investor, we were still behind that competitor I referred to earlier. And if we raised our salaries as a first order of business post-raise, we would lose his trust after almost fuming just to gain that trust. So what happened was, my salary didn't change for a few years, and that's just how it was. The startup survived, and here I am today. In fact, here's a photo of staff and families of Moneytree about a year ago. But as for the marriage, I spent 4 years in an unhappy marriage before amicably divorcing in 2019. I'm happy to tell you, though, my ex-wife still texts me with Moneytree support requests. When Zach said, "Don't get married, Mark," I wanted to hear it as a sardonic joke, but the reality was he knew me, he knew my ex-wife, and he knew it was unlikely to end successfully. And at that point in my life, I had been so focused on getting married and getting married to her. And actually, looking back now, that was my weakness. I lacked the courage to let the deal of marriage, fail. To keep the deal alive, my mouth wrote checks that my startup, me, couldn't cash. My ex-wife eventually lost trust in me. When is your salary going to go up? Soon. Even though the reality was that my startup survived and even began to thrive. And so the Mark standing before you today knows the right answer to your question. When will your salary go up? I don't know. But what I do know is that I promise to be transparent with you about it. And you need to accept some of that risk, and I need you to commit to that. Can you commit to that? This is the cost of being married to an early startup entrepreneur. And I think if I had said that at the time, she would have said no. And I think it would have exposed the thing I didn't really want to see, that we weren't really the right people for each other. And while that was not our only problem in our marriage, I know this is not the stage for that, our approaches to money and risk were very different. But I think that this story maps very well to employees at a startup. It's so easy to write those checks with your mouth when you're trying to attract talent for new hires. Get people excited about what their options might be worth, what the possibilities are. You could be a director. We're on a growth trajectory. Maybe you're trying to get in a C-level from a big company to come join your young startup. But you can't control all of these outcomes, and there will be a reckoning if you don't make them aware of the risks. And if somebody doesn't like these risks, it's probably better off that way. And that's what I learned. So admitting you don't know the answer or you aren't certain enough to commit to an answer is actually one way to build trust, not to lose it. This is a recent photo. I remarried in 2022, and this is my wife, Shoko, and our 2 sons. Hi, Leo. Hi, Kai. Okay, I had to do that, sorry. From the beginning of our relationship, I've managed my wife's expectations about the startup life. I talk about growth, I talk about upside, but never without mentioning the downside risks. You could say I sandbag a little bit. And just last week, after I'd written this entire speech, my wife said, "Can you stop doing that? Like, I know, I get it." And that is how you know you got your message across. You tell someone, you tell them again, and you tell them again. And when they tell you they're sick of hearing it, I think they heard it. So thank you for listening to my story today, and I hope you found something in it for you and your startup. Good luck.